In this particular video, I want to discuss exactly why you're not losing weight if you perceive you're currently on low calories. So as mentioned many times before within some of my previous videos, blog post articles, the key to fat loss is creating that calorie deficit. So what does a calorie deficit mean? Well, that essentially means you're burning more calories than you're consuming over a period of time. If you can do that, you will be losing weight, and then it's all subject to having weight training and also sufficient protein, which will dictate where you're losing that weight. So essentially, if you're in a calorie deficit, you will be losing weight, but you'll probably lose quite a bit of muscle mass as well, unless you're consuming sufficient protein, and then you've also got weight training as the foundation of your routine. So the calorie deficit is key for weight loss, but by having sufficient protein and then also weight training as the foundation of your routine, as well as the calorie deficit, that will mean fat loss, water and glycogen loss, as opposed to losing lots of muscle mass. So I'm sure you appreciate that that's the key to fat loss. You've heard this a million times before, but you're frustrated and you're confused because in your mind, you think you're currently consuming low calories and you think you should be within a calorie deficit needed for fat loss. So there's a few things here that we need to consider. The first is you are either knowingly or unknowingly going over your calorie figures. So let's say, for example, if you don't even realize you're doing this, potentially you're not tracking calories from drinks. Drinks is an easy way to add in calories without you even realizing it, and if you're a lightweight female in particular, that can easily be enough to wipe out the calorie deficit needed for fat loss. In addition to that, maybe you're not quite as strict on the serving sizes, especially things like fats in particular, so things like olive oil, nut butters, nuts. It's very easy to creep in 100, 200, 300 calories without it visually looking that much different in terms of the amount you're adding in. And that's where you need to be really careful, because a few hundred calories is easily enough to wipe out the calorie deficit needed for fat loss, especially if you're a lightweight female in particular. Most of the people that watch my content are female. I have males as well, but mainly female. So that's something to really consider. Are you being strict on the serving sizes? Because especially with fats, it's easy to creep in another few hundred calories, and that can be enough to wipe out the deficit. The next thing to consider is if you're consuming low calories throughout the week, but you have one binge day or one day you go well over your calorie figures, that can easily be enough to wipe out the calorie deficit needed for fat loss. It's not just a case of having low calories 6 days and then having one high day. If that high day is high enough, that will be enough to wipe out the calorie deficit needed for fat loss. That's another thing to consider. The next thing to consider, as mentioned many times before in my other content, is you may have just reached a fat loss plateau, and that therefore means that you need to either decrease calories further or add in more cardio to continue creating that calorie deficit needed for fat loss. So essentially, once you've got the weight training as the foundation of your routine, the weight training program as the foundation, you're just manipulating calories or cardio to continue creating that calorie deficit. So if you've reached a plateau, i.e. you have been strictly tracking everything and you're still not losing weight, it may just be a plateau, and that therefore means that, again, you need to drop calories or add in more cardio. Now, if your calories are already very low, I'd suggest going with the cardio route, because otherwise, if they're already low, it's going to be difficult to adhere to even lower calories, whereas adding in more cardio will basically do what you need to do in terms of busting through the plateau, but it's going to be easier to stick to. So that's another thing to consider. The final thing to consider is females, in particular their menstrual cycle. You're obviously going to have water retention, and that can really mask progress on the scale. So it's really important to try and measure a time where you're not holding on to water with another time you're not holding on to water, and then you can be objective with your progress rather than measuring your weight when you're holding on to water and then another time you're not. Again, that's going to be enough to stop seeing that weight moving in the right direction. So that's another thing to consider. The final thing to think about is sodium intake. If your sodium intake is very high, sodium has water retention properties, and that can be enough to mask progress on the scale. So make sure you're not having more than 3,000 milligrams of sodium per day. Try and limit that below that figure, and then you shouldn't have any issues with water retention masking progress on the scale. But hopefully that's been useful. Thank you very much for watching this. If you still need more help with this, creating that calorie deficit needed for fat loss, and you want some more help, please click the link in the description. Additionally, if you're still yet to subscribe to the channel, make sure you subscribe and like the video if you enjoyed it. I'll look forward to speaking to you soon.